Thanks. Thanks for inviting me. It's a great honour and privilege to be here. It's also a privilege to work for 25 of the UK's biggest NGOs. Some of them you all know, household names: Oxfam, Save the Children, UNICEF, Action Aid, Christian Aid, Water Aid, Muslim Aid, Islamic Relief, the One Campaign, Global Citizen. I won't name them all. But what I'm doing is I'm working with them to try and work collectively on a problem that they all share. It's not traditional for those organisations to work together. They've done it in the past with Make Poverty History and the IF campaign when the UK hosted global summits. But now they're working together not because there's a summit on the horizon, not because there's a sort of golden moment for advocacy, but because there is great political threat and jeopardy to the UK's commitment to 0.7. In fact, I've just heard news from home that the Prime Minister of Britain will face a vote tonight in the House of Parliament from the 315 MPs of her own party. If 158 of them vote against her, then we shall have a new Prime Minister in Britain by Christmas. So the position that new leader takes on international aid is obviously of great importance to me and to the organisation with which I work. But although today seems to be the moment of maximum jeopardy, and obviously I'm not entirely in the right place to be doing my job right now, but I'm sure they'll survive without me for a few hours. This has been a problem for several years. The last few years since the vote, the referendum vote in the UK to leave the European Union, has created a political climate in the UK in which aid has become incredibly fragile, and those sort of historic gains from the NGOs are under threat. Now, I know you're in a very different political position, and I'm quite envious of the position that you're in, but that's the reality that I'm dealing with, and I want to show you today, I want to show you 4 videos, but these 4 videos really make one central point. And as a communications professional, I passionately believe this, that if we want our messages to land with our target audience, if we want our communications to be effective, we absolutely have to understand the issues from the perspective of our target audience. Now, for all sorts of political reasons, and I could show you all sorts of data about the UK context, but it wouldn't necessarily be that interesting to you. Our target audience now are people who are over 50, who live in small towns in England, because those members of the public are now disproportionately influential in our political system. With a hung parliament and the political configuration as it is, that group of voters becomes disproportionately influential over this really important policy area. And so we have to speak to them in a language that they understand, and we have to connect with their objection. We have to see the merit in their argument, in their skepticism. So I'm going to show you 4 videos. The first one I'm going to show you I think might be familiar to you. The first one I'm going to show is the winner of the Rusty Radiators Award for last year, the Ed Sheeran video. But I've edited it. It's a 3.5-minute video. We've just taken a bit in the middle. And the bit in the middle I'm going to show you, and the reason I'm going to show it to you is because I'm going to argue that I think there is real merit in this video. So if we could have a look at video 1.
This is the really harsh reality for street children here and across the world. As you're tucking your children into bed tonight, children like JD are huddling together, sleeping outside, in danger, and very, very vulnerable. They really need your help tonight. Please give what you can.
Just for tonight, hold on.
Leaving JD and those kids there was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Really does not feel right leaving. That's all. I mean, the only thing you can do is help them, which we should. My natural instinct is to just put them in a car and just take them and just put them somewhere in the city and put them in a hotel until we can get them sorted. Can we do that? Can I pay for them to stay in a house until we get them into school? It doesn't matter how much it is. We'll just get him in. Even his 5 mates, we'll get him in a house, and but with an older person to look after. Because that's the problem. There's so little that Yeah, I don't think we should go until that's sorted either.
Can we do that? Is that okay? Can we just? It doesn't matter what it costs, is it? So, this is obviously a global superstar with incredibly deep pockets. And he's had an emotional connection because he's gone somewhere he would never normally have gone, and he's met people he would never normally have met. And he cares about them. JD, the kid he interviews, and his 5 mates. But then what you see in kind of slow motion is it dawning on him that, well, if we can't just take him, we've got to take the other 5. We can't just take the other 5, because what about the other people on the beach? And well, this obviously isn't the only beach, and this isn't the only country. So, maybe like we need taxpayers' money and governments working together. So he's basically making the case for aid without making the case for aid. And that reaction is authentic, I think, because I've seen it myself. So I lived and worked in Kenya, and friends and family of mine who have never traveled to the developing world ever before, never been to Africa, would come and visit me in Kenya, and I would take them to urban slums, and they would meet people living in poverty, and they would care about the people that they met, and they would want to help them, and indeed they did help them. But then they would realize that what about all the other people here that I can't help? What about the other 5 slums just in Nairobi? What about the other cities in Kenya? What about the other countries across the continent? And so, again, their thinking starts to change. They start to reassess what they thought because of an experience. Now, the problem is that most Brits will never make that trip, will never meet those people. Only 75% of people in the UK have a passport, and of those who use their passport, less than 25% actually visit the developing world. And the poor countries that Brits in the UK visit tend to be in Europe, and that's tourist destinations. There's just no lived experience of the developing world or of people who live in poverty. So the frame of reference is fundraising, is NGO fundraising. And what you've seen is an appeal film. And so Comic Relief would have put that on BBC One on the night of the telethon. And the success measure for whether it worked or not was how much money it generated. Now, 6 million people watched that video on YouTube, and on the night, Comic Relief raised £50 million or more. That's the 10th year in a row that they've, So I'm not saying it doesn't have value and utility, but there is an impact to the fundraising messaging that our sector puts out in terms of people who are not convinced, in terms of people who are not going to respond to the trigger for fundraising. They do also hear that messaging. They do also watch that television. They do also see those adverts. And actually what a lot of our messaging does is it pushes them further back into a position of skepticism about whether aid really works. We test a lot of videos with this target audience, and we listen to the response. We see which ones they engage with. We listen to the comments that they give us back. And the dominant frame, the absolutely dominant frame amongst this group of skeptical audience in the UK right now is charity begins at home. So in the UK, we've had 10 years of what the government calls austerity measures, cuts to just about every domestic budget. And at the same time, the aid budget has increased. So the public all have an example of how more money at home to reverse certain cuts. My mother can't get a hospital appointment, my brother had his benefits cut, my sister can't get her kids into the school she wants. Everybody's got their go-to example for how more money at home would make a difference. And versus that, they have this, they're just not sure if aid works, because they have 2 bits of messaging. They have relentlessly negative right-wing media in the press, which shows all the aid projects that don't work. And they also have NGO fundraising, which keeps showing the need, which keeps showing the problem and doesn't really show the progress. So against these 2 things, they naturally, and I think quite reasonably, go, okay, well, I know this works, I'm not sure about this, So charity begins at home. I'm not against this stuff. It's just, it should be secondary. This should be first. And that's the dominant frame that we have to connect with. So I'm going to show you a second video, and this is a video that we made. Really low production value, filmed on a mobile phone. But this is a video that we've made with some activists in Newport Pagnell. So Newport Pagnell is a very small town, about an hour and a half drive north of London. Politically, the people who live there are now incredibly important because of our political system to the future of our aid policy. And so we've tried to make a video with people who live there, talking to other people who live there in a way that they can connect to and understand. So let's play the second video, please.
The reason I love living in Newport is because it's got such a strong community, and people are always very willing to help people.
I love living in Newport. It's got such a community spirit here. Everybody gets on well with everybody. It's just a great place.
I think it's important that people are aware that the government makes a significant contribution to overseas aid. And I'm really proud that our government does that. We are a rich country, and that wealth should be shared.
Our government giving aid internationally is brilliant. We are one of the richest countries in the world. I'm really, really proud as a taxpayer to be able to support that and to do my bit.
We all share the world, and we should all support each other the best way that we possibly can.
So that's Sarah and Mark, two ordinary people living in a pretty ordinary place, talking about why they support it. And so that frame for us works really well. And I know it works because I've seen all this data, and I could show you all the data from the feedback of all the different videos that we've tested. But surprisingly, it's the sort of worst video. I mean, that video is just not... No, any of the video production people here would be embarrassed if they produced that. Rather. So, but the point is, and this is my central point, it works with the target audience. They hear what we're trying to get across to them, and they can use it as a prompt to rethink their skepticism and their opposition to UK aid, because they see other people like them. The thing about this skepticism is, although it's wide, it's not very deep. Most people in the UK don't think about overseas aid very much at all, in fact. So when we prompt them and force them to say whether they think it should be cut or increased, the natural thing is to think, well, everybody else thinks it should be cut. I kind of think charity begins at home. It should probably be cut. But that sentiment is weak. What we have to do is connect with it where it is to give people the opportunity to reconsider their thinking. So the temptation, I think, in the organisations that we work, because we know so much about what we do, is to give them facts, show them it works, tell them it works, give them lots of numbers, prove our impact. The problem is that doesn't connect with the emotional frame. They're using a frame as a mental shortcut to process this imagery. When they see a fundraising ask, they don't go to the phone and donate. In fact, Direct Ask TV, DRTV, the ads that you can help for £3 a month. The success of those videos is measured in a fraction of 1%. No DRTV ad has ever got more than 1% response rate, which means 99% of the people who see that video are not giving us money. I think it's really important, the message that those people take from that advertising, from that messaging. So that's not an appeal film. We're not asking for money. Really, what we're just asking for people to do is to reconsider whether they're prepared to give political consent. And we think that's important because until we destroy our country through Brexit, we are still the 5th largest economy in the world, and actually 0.7% of the 5th largest economy in the world is quite a bit of shoulder-to-the-wheel effort in terms of meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. So we think the policy is really valuable and really important, but we need to get political consent for it. Now, what if we can't sort of industrialize and do, that is not an expensive video to make, but it is time-consuming because we need to build a relationship with people. We need them to, and when we make videos like that, they ask us for scripts. What argument should I use? What message should I? And I am very resistant to this. So these videos are different across the different countries, tonally. We want people to speak authentically in the way they would speak to their friends and family. It's a different kind of message. This is not 1990s style communication of sort of key messaging and we focus group. That we actually want the diversity of that. But there are things that we can do to try and a sort of shorter route to goal, if you like. And I'm going to show you a video of a celebrity. But this is a very relatable celebrity. This is a celebrity called Dyer, who is an actor who is on a soap opera called EastEnders. And he plays a character in this soap opera who's like a landlord, a barman, works in a pub. He's a very working class guy, has a very working class fan base. But he's in people's living rooms. He's regularly on TV in this soap opera. And this video I'm going to show you is him talking about his experience going to, from the perspective of our audience, places you'll never go and meeting people you'll never meet. So let's play video 3.
Well, you met Hassan, who works on the dump.
Yeah, absolutely. Lives on a tip, on a dump. Never left the dump. His dad tries not to tell him about school, so that other children, he tries to keep him away from other children so that he doesn't know about school. So I tried to interview this kid, and all he knows is about picking up bits of tin and bits of rubber so that he can fill this big bag up, so hopefully so that he can get $1, so that he can eat some rice. That's what his day consists of. And you think, how have we let this happen? And the powers that be, whoever they are, the governments, whatever, us as human beings, as a human race, can actually help each other out.
There you go. The governments, the powers that be, whatever, just sort it out. Okay? I showed this video to a room full of the CEOs of the 25 organisations that I work with, and one of them said, you know, we've all had that experience that he's describing. You know, we visit the programs, we go to refugee camps, we have that experience. The problem is, we know so much about the solutions and we care so much about making it work that by the time we got on the plane and we come back and then we tell that story, we've overlaid it with all this development jargon and all this technical stuff, and we've lost the power of the storytelling. Now, the benefit in that is it's relatable. There's no jargon. It just talks about a particular level. But you know, the other thing we've seen when we've tested these videos is that the moment you show any developing world context, you trigger a frame which I think has been set by our own fundraising. Because in the UK, you only see the developing world on the news when there's a disaster, or from NGO advertising when they're asking you to make a donation, an appeal. And so any video we show, no matter how engaged the protagonist is, how much sort of agency we give to the beneficiary, which I hate that phrase, but just any video that you know, the best of those types of videos just trigger the same frame. And so that might have been a solution 10 years ago, but I think after maybe 2 decades, the kind of compound impact of the way we've been fundraising means that there's now a negative frame, and we just need to change the conversation. So what we need in videos is that the protagonist is someone like me, is someone I can relate to. One of the worst performing videos that we tested was a 9-year-old girl in South Sudan talking about why she couldn't go to school. And I absolutely love this video. It's brilliant. And I got it from one of the NGOs, and I took the branding off, and I made it all kind of clean, and then inserted it and tested it with our target audience. And the director of advocacy, when she saw the results from these video tests, said, you know, that absolutely breaks my heart. You know, we think of that girl as one of our team. The advocacy division, we tell her story all the time, but we've got to listen to this data that actually it turns out if you're a 50-year-old woman in Newport Pagnell, it's really difficult to relate to a 9-year-old girl in South Sudan. But actually you can relate to a 50-year-old woman in Newport Pagnell talking about a girl in South Sudan and the challenges she meets. So for me, it's not about what you like, it's about what works. And I think in our modern age, we have more data and more feedback and more ways to listen to our audience than ever before. So the question is whether we've got the kind of, the will to do that. The last film I'm going to show you makes exactly the same point, but from a completely different angle. So the final film is basically the story of the work that I do in Kenya. So I work with an organisation called Well Told Story, the clue's in the name. They're a media production company which work in Kenya and Tanzania, and they speak to a target audience of 15 to 24-year-old Kenyan and Tanzanian youngsters. And that's our target audience. And so the kind of videos we make for them and the kind of media we do is completely different. So have a look at the story of Shujaz. I should explain, Shujaz is in Sheng, the local language of the urban slums in Nairobi and poor parts of Kenya, means heroes. And so this is a comic book story about heroes in their community. So let's see the fourth video.
Shujaz is a story about young people growing up in modern Kenya, and it's delivered simultaneously on multiple media, on broadcast radio, on digital video, animation, social media, comic books, SMS, and the real world and online games. This media is designed to reach and engage monthly audience of over 6 million young people in a conversation about big ideas that transform their lives. Like most of Africa, Kenya has a massive youth population. Half of the people are under 18 years old and 2/3 are below 30. Sheer numbers are overstretching all Kenyan systems and institutions. Our audience face huge challenges in their daily lives. The Shujaz platforms offer information and ideas to help them improve their lives. These young people cannot rely on old official channels to deliver the opportunities they need and desire. Today's youth have to create opportunities for themselves.
So Shujaz is a communications tool to speak to a target audience of 15 to 24-year-old Kenyans and Tanzanian. And lots of donors want to speak to that demographic, that group. They want to talk to them about unplanned pregnancies. They want to talk to them about economic livelihoods. They want to talk to them about politics and governance, corruption, and about post-election violence, particularly in Kenya. So that's the job of work that we need to get done. And Shujaz, the monthly comic book, the weekly radio station, and the 24/7, 365 social media curated by a dozen social media professionals who are themselves all young Kenyans, speaks to the audience in a relatable language in a way that they can understand. And we research the issues that we're trying to talk to people. So a very common myth amongst teenage Kenyan boys is that condoms give you cancer, which is why you shouldn't use condoms. You can see the problem in that, okay? So that is the objection, that is the genuinely held view that we have to connect to in order to get people to reconsider their thinking. And we use people like me, from the perspective of the audience, in order to deliver that message and to get that reconsideration. And so actually, although I've shown you 4 completely different videos, I've just spoken about one really quite simple communications principle. In the UK, we've got real political jeopardy. We need to talk to this audience who are beyond range for our supporter acquisition. In Kenya, we're doing development programming, but we're using exactly the same principle. In Kenya, we call it player first. Really, it's just about listening and hearing the objection, understanding the kind of merit in that objection, connecting to it where it is, and trying to move it just a little so that people can reconsider a feeling that they have, which is negative, but is not that entrenched. And there's nothing else in the UK that's doing it, so it's a great privilege to be involved in that campaign. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Richard. Well spoken. From what you say, is it right to assume that modern audience, the people of today, will have to have directly ascribed situations which they can react intuitively on, because they have been sort of vaccinated against the manipulating skills of advertising, media, advisors, and so on too long, simply?
Yeah, I think there's definitely something in that. I think in our sort of modern social media age, particularly when you're talking about a UK audience where Facebook and other social media is really prevalent. I'd say our target audience is over 50s. Actually, just about everybody in the UK over 50 is on Facebook, and a huge proportion of them are checking Facebook every day. It's kind of Facebook for grandparents, we call it. But at the same time, you're right, they are attuned to the fact that they're being advertised to by commercial brands with really high production value videos, and with this sort of level of communication sophistication. And I think increasingly they're tuning that out, and they're looking for more authentic digital content, which is more like the pictures that their grandchildren post of, the pictures that their children post of their grandchildren. And that kind of communication, that kind of authenticity is what I think we need to harness if we're going to connect with those people.
There's a message in that for modern-day politicians as well, isn't it? Absolutely. Most governments today claim that you should sort of describe the results of aid activities by giving figures, facts, data in a sort of nutshell way. Is that the right way to go about it, to engage people and make them understand what really happens?
It's tempting, isn't it? It's so tempting, because we care about it. Is that
a leading
so
question
much.
in a way?
But it's such a bad idea. I can't tell you what. Because the problem then is you are contesting the space on your opponent's territory. So if the critique is aid doesn't work, and I'll show you one example of aid not working, and that's why the whole of the aid program doesn't work. To think that we can contest that narrative by going, oh no, but you've shown one, but let me tell you about 10 aid programs that do work. That, you know, you're just basically connecting, because the frame that people have is this skepticism. You need to change the conversation. You can't debate in the right-wing media. You can't even, I don't think, win a battle on kind of efficiency. You have to take it somewhere else. You have to show people that people like them support international development and aid, and show them the reasons why that resonate with them. I think if you get into a conversation that has any kind of level of complexity or detail, or you will lose that battle and lose that conversation. So I know, because we know so much about it, it's so tempting to want to educate them and rebut them and give them facts, but they have this mental shortcut, and they use it to process the information you give us. If you show them facts that object to the frame, they will reject the facts rather than break the frame. What you have to do is change the conversation, start a new frame, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.